All right, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. Well, the referendum in Virginia didn't quite go our way. In the name of restoring fairness, Virginians narrowly passed a redistricting map that turns one voting district into a confusing blob, roughly in the shape of a delicious lobster. But there is nothing tasty about this bug. It decimates Republican majority districts, but there may be hope yet. For our main topic today, we're going to cover the amazing indictments coming down against the Southern Poverty Law Center, which apparently has been funding people within the extremist groups that they claim to oppose. The window company has been breaking glass around town, I guess. And for Unhinged, we have the very empathetic left physically assaulting a woman journalist for daring to be right-wing while covering their anti-ICE protest. And then they went on a sympathy tour in the media. We are going to talk about all of this in episode 533 of the In the Tank podcast. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea Luke, and your host. And as always, we also have Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute, and Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow. Chris Talgo could not join us today, but we also have Andy Singer, who is our producer in the background, keeping the show moving along. There he is. Hello, Andy. So to our English viewers today, I'd like to welcome all of you to the show as usual, and also wish you a very blessed St. George's Day. How is everyone doing?
I'm doing great. It is such a glorious spring day here in Northern Illinois. It's finally here. It feels so great. Have the windows open. And usually this kind of weather puts me in a good mood. But I took a lot of notes for this podcast, and it got me angrier and angrier. So we'll see how this day goes.
Absolutely. Sam?
Yes, I did a lot of thinking about this podcast too, and I'm getting funnier and funnier about it. I want to wish everybody, in addition to the St. George's birthday, I want to wish everyone who's listening on the live feed, especially, and the team here, a happy Shakespeare's birthday, which is international. Yeah. It's for the entire world. Yes, that's William great. Shakespeare.
Wow, double hitter for English today. All right. So before we get started, you guys, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. And please also click the thumbs up to like the video. I can see there are people watching live right now. You could all click the thumbs up button right now. And remember that sharing it can also help to break through some of YouTube and also apparently X.com suppression. That's fun. Even just helping us out by leaving a comment is good as well. And if you're an audio listener, you can help us by leaving a nice review. But you can also help us another way, one which also helps you and your finances. So a lot of people in the conservative, libertarian, and emergency prep spaces will hit you with ads for buying precious metals. They're not wrong that they're a good investment, but you want to be careful about who you buy your metals from. At In the Tank, we trust Advisor Metals over all of those other guys, and that's because we know that the person running the place is the best of the best. A great friend of Liberty, Ira Bershatsky owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. That's a lot of words, What does that mean for me? Well, it's important because it means everything that Ira or a member of his team says to you actually has to be completely factual. So there's no sketchy sales pitch or bait and switch. Ira and his team are held to the highest ethical standards, and there's full transparency, which is way too lacking in other places nowadays, which we will talk about towards the end of the show today. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you are planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, and if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. He's going to make it very easy for you, and he will not launder your money through the SPLC. Please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals, and when you talk to Ira, make sure you let him know who sent you. That helps us as you're helping your financial future by diversifying with precious metals at Advisor Metals. All right, thank you guys. I wanted to get to that first at the top of the show today because we have so much to talk about, and I didn't want to have a interruption throughout all of that because it's kind of crazy today. So first with Unhinged. A couple of weeks ago, Savannah Hernandez, who is a reporter and she works for Turning Point USA, she was attacked while covering an anti-ICE protest. And she's known for covering leftist violence. She's been attacked before at Antifa protests and things like that. But this is an interesting one. In Minneapolis, she began to be surrounded and shoved around by protesters, particularly one family, a husband, wife, and daughter who followed her, blew whistles in her ear, eventually struck her, and the husband shoved her to the ground. That was bad enough, and Savannah ended up having to go to the hospital later for her injuries, I think having to do with whiplash. So we'll play the initial assault video here, which would be ICE 2. Yeah, nice. By the way, blowing a whistle in someone's ear is assault.
Yes.
My daughter? No! Stop touching me!
Very nice.
You fucking touched me!
Jesus Christ!
Leave me!
All right, we can stop it there. So fast forward today, what are those people doing? They are going on a media tour complaining about how they have received online harassment since the event. So Savannah herself has been kind of keeping up with this. Obviously, she is very interested in seeing what happens to these people. I believe she's pressed charges, but for some reason the police have not followed through with it or something. But so the father in the story says that the backlash that his family has been receiving for their actions last weekend has been overwhelming and nonstop. He's now second guessing living in the United States, as he is a Ukrainian refugee, I suppose, because he's unhappy with how negatively the public has reacted to him assaulting a woman on camera. He is in complete disbelief, stating that I've never had anything like this happen in my life. Chris and Diana have been going on a press tour, continuing to assert that they are the real victims, despite millions watching the footage of them instigating everything. There's also a GoFundMe for them, where they're currently trying to raise $8,000, stating that they've lost their jobs and are facing one of the most overwhelming and life-altering moments they've ever experienced. And I think we have another video of them complaining about the situation.
You guys do get doxxed, but I don't know if you guys are getting the same type of stuff that we're getting. And it's nonstop. It's hundreds of phone calls a day. It's text messages and them trying to get into all of our social media accounts and contacting our friends, our neighbors, our family. The rest of our family is getting doxxed as well. It's not just us. It's my sons, their wives, people that had nothing to do with anything. It's a little overwhelming. And makes me second guess even living in this country, to be honest with you, with all this going on. I've never had this happen in my life.
Anyway, so also, one of their other daughters actually has gone to social media, like disavowing the family, which is always ugly. But she is saying that part of the reason why she like distanced herself from them in the first place is because of their lack of accountability and like kind of crazy behavior in other instances. So this is apparently a pattern of activity, and I wanted to share this because I think it's really interesting how people like this can turn around so quickly and pretend to be victims even after the stuff is literally on camera, Jim, right? I mean, how do you square this with the like evidence that everyone can see?
Yeah, in the video, the first video that we showed of Savannah Hernandez, I guess from one of her friends and even from her own camera, you don't really clearly see what he did to her, but you see it on the second clip where somebody else has another camera, and he just shoves her to the ground from behind, like big strong guy is assaulting a young woman, and now you're going to go around and think people are going to you want sympathy for that. That is the definition of unhinged, which unfortunately sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's infuriating, but we have an unhinged segment on this show because there is so much unhinged behavior going on around the country that is worth mentioning. It's going to be a feature for a long time, I suspect. But let's also back it up and just think about how insane this is. All of this for what? For what? For the federal government enforcing immigration law. That's it. The left has been, and this is kind of a running theme, it's going to be a running theme on the show today, and it has been for a while, and how the media and the Democratic Party and the left, they are whipping themselves up into literal frenzies, violent frenzies, over lies and nonsense like this. The Biden administration let in anywhere between 10 and maybe more million of unvetted illegal immigrants, and they need to go. They've broken the law by getting in here. They're breaking the law by staying here. And this is the enforcement. I've mentioned this several times. If the Democrats don't like the immigration laws that we have on the books, they have no one to blame but themselves, because most conservatives and Republicans would have much stricter immigration law than we have today. So what we have is we are enforcing the Democrats' desire in immigration law in this country. And for that, ICE is being attacked. They're being doxxed. I think California tried to pass a law. I think a judge just enjoined that, so it's not going into effect, but making it so that ICE officers can't, basically be anonymous or wear masks, and that they have to identify themselves. They have to be seen on camera, so that them and their families could literally be killed, because that is how high and crazy this frenzy has gotten. And again, for what? For enforcing federal immigration law. That's it. This is not, yet we have these people are whipped up like this to the fact, I'm trying to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. I don't think under a normal circumstance, he thinks it's okay to assault women, but here he is doing it. And with spittle coming out of his face in a complete rage. And what was her crime? Standing around. The left and the Democratic Party are weaponizing and creating literal goon squads that they are unleashing on innocent Americans who are not breaking any laws. This cannot continue. It just cannot continue this way. And for him to then go around trying to get on a sympathy tour, and he doesn't know if he wants to live in this country anymore. Hey, the door is open, man. The same door that millions of illegals came in on is also open for you to go out the other way.
This is the perfect example of the definition of the Yiddish word chutzpah, which is when a person goes and kills his parents, and then he asks the judge for mercy because he's an orphan. And that's exactly what's going on here. And Jim, you brought up law enforcement, and I think that is a central element of this. What's going on here is that the left, especially during the Clinton administration, but also even during the George H.W. Bush administration, began to take over the agencies of law enforcement and of intelligence. I would say began to take over those intelligence agencies, but obviously they had a strong contingent within those agencies long before that, for decades before that. However, during the 1990s, I think it was obviously weaponized, as you saw with the rise of Janet Reno as Attorney General. And you saw things like the terrible, frankly, I think a mass murder at the compound in Waco. And so what has gone on here, though, is that the left has taken over law enforcement across the country on the state and local level in many states. And they have corrupted it terribly. If you look at that video, you can see that there's a police car, probably about 50 feet behind all of this. And they knew what was going on, and they did nothing to break it up. Now that is reminiscent. Have you ever seen any of those 1960s movies where they're based in a small town and the police are horrifically corrupt? You have to check those out. In the Heat of the Night is a famous one that I think it won the Academy Award that year. And the small towns depicted in 1960s films, especially the ones in the South, are always shown as being overwhelmingly shown as being terribly corrupt. And the corruption is always centered on the sheriff, because the sheriff is really the henchman for the local government, the corrupt local government. And that's what you see here. And guess what? In those cases in the 1960s in the South, it was Democrats that were doing it. Now, this isn't a purely partisan issue, but it is a habit of this group, the left and their captive Democrat Party, to break the law with impunity, and then when they get caught, complain about it and lie about it. And this has obviously got to stop. The only way for it to stop is for people like this to be prosecuted, and the people who have been protecting them to be prosecuted as well. The only way the people who have been protecting these people can be prosecuted is on the state level. And if that doesn't happen, then there is another remedy, and that's for them to be prosecuted on the federal level. And this country has got to get after that, because otherwise the political system is absolutely defunct. It's done. Yeah. So we've really got to get on top of this.
Well, I mean, that guy shouldn't be going on a cable news
apology.
He should be going to jail. He should be calling his wife to bail him out of jail, because that's assault. And the left seems to think that they have carte blanche to assault people because they disagree with your politics.
Well, why wouldn't they think that?
That for so long.
Yeah, they haven't been penalized for that, so why wouldn't they think that? I mean, it's gotten to the point where the left really does play on like an entirely different set of rules than the rest of us, and it's going to get worse and worse until they get some kind of repercussions for that. But I would say, before I move us along here, that I guess it shouldn't really be so much a surprise, not just because of the Antifa connections, which supposedly also exist in this particular ICE protest, but also, if you're already protesting upholding the rule of law, I guess it shouldn't surprise us that they don't mind breaking the law themselves, and assaulting people and thinking that that's an okay thing to get away with if you felt strongly enough about the situation that you were already protesting. It's all just kind of messed up. You know what else is messed up? This redistricting map. So my next section here is talking about some of the new gerrymandering stuff in Virginia. This is very unfortunate, but once again, Republicans just did not turn out. We have such a bad time turning out for these referendums. And there was some very sketchy activity also with some of the vote counting, as usual. It's really weird whenever vote counting gets delayed and the votes come in and stuff. It never is like a surplus of Republican votes that come in. It's just really strange. Anyway, so Virginia, this is from the Post-Millennial. Virginia Democrats score victory with redistricting vote, shutting out GOP voters. So the vote will likely flip 4 out of the 5 GOP congressional districts in the state, taking the 6-5 Democrat seat advantage in Congress to 10-1. The Virginia referendum measure to redistrict the state congressional boundaries, pushed by Democrats and the Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger, has passed, which will likely flip 4 out of the 5 GOP districts in the state. So the measure passed on Tuesday night around 9 p.m. with 50.7% yes to 49.3% no votes, with more votes still coming in that evening. And they all went pretty much to the Democrat side. And the map proposed by the Democrats in the legislature has been slammed by conservatives online, showing that one gerrymandered district looks like it is in the shape of a lobster. You can see it on screen there. That is a very lobstery looking map. The text of the ballot measure asked of the voter to vote yes or no to the following text. Should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in upcoming elections, while ensuring Virginia's standard redistricting process resumes for all future redistricting after the 2030 census? So blatant, just appalling. Anyway, so the Daily News, or the Daily Wire, has an investigative reporter, Luke Rosiak, who noted Virginia currently has mathematically perfectly fair congressional maps, 55% of the seats and 52% of the popular vote, close to parity as you can get with 11 seats. And this obviously would change that dramatically. Now, there is still hope, though. Ken Cuccinelli reports that the referendum was ruled unconstitutional by a federal circuit court, Sam, and the judge blocked the election certification. So does this mean that this redistricting like craziness is dead on arrival, or is there still a good chance that this could move forward?
My expectation is that it is dead, that it's not going to go through. There are some just major mistakes that they made in terms of the process. And those are very clear things that they did. Now, the language where they said to restore fairness, that's clearly argumentation, and the law strictly says in Virginia that you can't do that in creating a ballot proposition. So that is completely egregious right there. It can't stand. But on top of that, they did so many other things wrong, and I don't know if they really care whether they get the seats changed. I don't know if they really care. I think what they're really doing is trying to pacify their base and show that we're doing something, which is what government's always doing. We're doing something. So I think that it's not going to stand. It's just so far off that it's just too many things are wrong with it for it to go through. I found, though, that there is a really interesting element here that we really need to discuss. As you mentioned, first of all, the hilarious notion that there was a cheat involved even in this is purely comical, although obviously horrible. So everything in this country is tragicomic at this point. But I think that it went from a 1.5% difference to a 3% difference in a couple of minutes. It was like that classic 2020 vote where you see it go whoop and then over. So in the presidential vote,
they call it an F curve because it just goes up like a letter F, just like that.
Right. Well, what's going on here is there was a 12-point movement toward the Republican position statewide. It was 15 points. Spanberger won by 15 points. Won the governorship by 15 points. She's now the most hated governor, I think, that they've ever measured the hatred for through polling. But and so they won this one by 3 points, if indeed they won that by 3, and if indeed they won the original one by 15. But let's just take those numbers as given. That's a 12-point swing. That's a 12-point swing statewide. If that proves true nationwide, this year's elections, let's say the national elections, will prove to be the biggest anomaly, the biggest change in history. where you usually get absolute slaughter of the party in power, especially with the presidential power. You usually get an absolute slaughter in the second year of a president's term. This could be the reverse. If these numbers prove real nationwide, this is a big story, even though I think, as I said, I don't think it's going, the change is going to go through. But this is a big story for that reason. And we will continue, I believe, as a team here, continue to look at this because it has enormous policy implications and enormous implications for the future of the country.
Yeah, and it's just yet another case of Democrats breaking the rules and not caring. All they care about is victory. The reason why this was immediately challenged in court, and we'll see what judges it gets in front of in Virginia. We'll see, is that the Democrats broke the legislative rules, several of them, according to Ken Cuccinelli. And if you don't, it's like, oh, that's just a technicality. Well, it matters. Following the rules of the legislature matter, because without it, you have absolute chaos. I mean, just think of it this way. You need a 2/3 vote in Congress to override a presidential veto. Imagine it's like, well, we got almost 2/3, so we're overriding it anyway. That would be the same thing. That's why you have legislative rules, so that you have proper order and that the will of the people is carried out, in a sensible and legal way. If when this gets in front of the courts, they should throw the whole thing out. Again, we'll see what panels that they go before, and whether Democrat judges are capable of actually interpreting the law accurately, instead of just yet again getting another by any means necessary cheat win for their preferred party. And this, and again, just on the general principle, we are being gaslit here again. Millions and millions of dollars. All the money for this went on the side of yes on this referendum in Virginia, because it was supposedly necessary to protect our democracy from Donald Trump, and we're being gaslit on this idea that Republicans are the ones who are always gerrymandering. I live in Illinois. Illinois has been drawing congressional districts to favor Democrats for decades and decades, and almost as absurdly, sometimes actually just as absurd or even more absurd than what happened in Virginia on this redistricting plan.
What?
Yeah, that's right. At least in Illinois, so far, they only do it every 10 years with the census. Although now there's talk that they're going to just come in here and do it all over again, because you have to rig the rules. That's the only way you can win. I lived in Virginia for a time. I lived in both Northern Virginia and in what is called real Virginia. And real Virginia is awesome. Northern Virginia is not awesome. But these districts are drawn so absurdly that it's basically, they come out like spokes of a wheel in Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, Arlington County, and then just kind of sprinkles out from that. You have people that are on the border, on the other side of the Shenandoah Mountains that are represented by a member of Congress now, if this holds, that live 3 hours away. Yet, if you're in Northern Virginia, you can drive for 20 minutes and go into 3 different districts right across the top. It is so brazen, and yet the media coverage is like it's no big deal. And just one other thing about the idea that this is it's really unfair. I mean, obviously, 10 strong Republican or Democrat districts to 1 Republican district in the state of Virginia, when it's basically a very purple state, slightly going to the Democrats. To all these, if you encounter somebody who says this is completely unfair, or it actually is fair because the Republicans do this, ask them, how many Republican districts are there in all of New England? The answer is 0. There is not a single Republican congressional district in anywhere in New England. I think it was 40% of voters in New Hampshire voted for Donald Trump. Maybe more. They don't get any representation in Congress. It's all dominated by the Democrats. So this idea that this is necessary to protect democracy and all that is, again, it's all projection, it's all gaslighting, it's all lies. This is the opposite of a democratic representation. It is disenfranchising half of the people of Virginia for a blatant power grab, and this is what they want to do. They want to ensure that they take Congress in the midterms. I mean, history says they were going to do that anyway, because they are determined to put Donald Trump out of office and in jail if they're able to do it.
Absolutely. Sorry, I keep coughing and stuff, you guys. Matt Whitlock actually made a fairly good, interesting point about this particular lobster map. He points out that it's not just crazy because of the shape, but it's actually because people that live west of Shenandoah will be represented by an NGO consultant in Arlington that's 3 hours away, and he has to cross 5 districts to actually get to the district or to maintain the district that he actually lives in. So it's just, yeah, it's crazy. Oh, I see that you have the map up there. Yeah. Wild. Chicago is Illinois is about as bad as this. There's some pretty crazy ones there too. But this is one of those things too where people get mad on the right when you say, well, maybe we should, maybe Florida should do a little creative map making and stuff like that. And everyone will go crazy saying like, that's terrible. It's not, this isn't right procedure to gerrymander like this. You're not supposed to do it this way. Well, if Democrats are always gerrymandering, and they are always gerrymandering, they've already changed the rule. So now we're playing by a standard of rules that they don't play by. We're playing a different game, a completely different game, actually, when it comes to this kind of politics. So I don't know what the solution is. One of our viewers asked the question, or DJ Bo asks, should red precincts withhold election results until the cities have reported their results in full to try and prevent this issue where, like, randomly a bunch of Democrat votes come in after midnight? That keeps happening, coincidentally. I don't know about I think everybody just has to get their votes in on time. I think we just can't do this thing where all of a sudden it pauses for a while and then it comes back again. I think you have to have, on referendums like this, it's a little bit easier because you really do have election day, right? I don't know. Maybe they were able to vote in advance, but I think they had. Oh, they were? Yeah. I think you have to have election day would solve a lot of these problems. And I personally think that we shouldn't be doing voting machines at all, except for tabulators. No matter how inconvenient it is, too bad. But we're having election day and we're doing it on paper because this has just gotten out of control, and all of these different mechanisms that have been built into our voting systems are just like fraud attractants. Every single one of them are designed to be easier to cheat. So yeah, it's all a mess.
I mean, you said it, Linnea. It's how is it that, God, I mean, I'm gonna go crazy again here, because the 2020 election, we were told, was the most secure election in American history, when we threw out every single election rule in almost every state, just threw it away, gave everybody a mail-in ballot. People were reporting, it's anecdotal evidence, but people were reporting, I have 7 ballots mailed to my house. I don't even know who these people are. I just saw yesterday that in the state of Michigan, again, they're looking back at the 2020 election, there were people with printed obituaries that were still on the voter rolls and had voted. So the idea that voter fraud doesn't happen, the idea that a party so desperate for power would not try to get away with cheating in order to grab that power is just foolish to not think that happens. And as you mentioned, Linnea, how is it that every time they extend counting, the vote totals only go in one direction? How is it that in the 2020 election in states like Michigan, like, oh my God, here we go again. The voting, the counting stopped in just the swing states. How is it that Florida, which went strongly for Trump, was able to get their vote totals in early? It was way on time. That night, they knew they had all their votes counted, but not Pennsylvania, not Michigan, not Wisconsin. It beggars belief to think that it's just a coincidence that counting stops in the swing states, and then when they restart the count, 90% of the votes go to the Democrats. It's It's impossible for that
Yeah.
to have happened.
I
And
will
the
never
idea that there's no evidence of it is complete bunk.
I will never forget 2020 because I was not just because of how crazy it was, but because of how glued I was more glued probably to that election than even Trump's election, because Trump's initial election, I went to bed before it was all finished, assuming that even though it was going pretty well, that he wasn't going to win because, that was just kind of the narrative at the time. And I was also very worried about 2020, but I wasn't anticipating the level of fraud that we ended up seeing. And I was at the time in quarantine for COVID because we were working offshore. And in order to work on the ships offshore, you had to go into this quarantine hotel for almost a week and just sit around twiddling your thumbs every day in this hotel room. And so that election night, I was sitting in my quarantine hotel room, like glued to the TV that was on something, Fox or Newsmax or something, and then on my laptop all the like different feeds and stuff that I was following. I'd never done that before, where I just had like multiple feeds going, and I was really stressed out about it and stuff. I'll never forget it because I stayed up through the point where the voting stopped, or the counting stopped randomly, and then it didn't pick up again until like 3 a.m. or whatever. And it was just appalling. It was the craziest thing to watch. I think, I never want anyone to forget those voter count maps that were like, here's the Trump one, just a kind of a regular distribution. And then here's the Biden one, and it goes boop, and it keeps going. It's just, that was the most insane thing I've ever seen. I've not heard a reasonable explanation for why, like how that could possibly happen statistically.
Right.
Yeah, right. Totally normal.
And I'd also like an explanation. No one has ever even tried to offer one. How is it that in the last like 4 elections, it was like for Obama, 68 million votes, Hillary, 68, 70 million votes, Joe Biden, 81 million votes. Come back to the next election, we're back around to the high 60s and 70s in the votes. How's that possible? Where'd those 20 million people go? Has anyone even asked? Does anyone even care? I care. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's impossible. We didn't just lose 20 million people. The rapture didn't come. They weren't taken away. I don't understand. And nobody will explain it to me. So the idea that it was the most secure election in American history, and I don't know how we got down this road. I started yelling about it, I guess. So this is supposed to be about the gerrymander in Virginia and restoring fairness to our elections. I think the only way we restore fairness to our elections is what you said, Linnea. We have to have election day. If you're not willing to get up and go to your polling place and vote on the day of election day, then just don't. Too bad. You don't get to say it in the way our nation is run. And I am 100% in favor of making election day a national holiday. You maybe make it on a Saturday. Who knows? But make sure that nobody has to work. There's no excuses. It's very important that you vote, but you vote in person, because every single fake vote takes away your franchise.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I'm gonna move us along. I'm sorry, Sam. I'm gonna move us because I know that we're gonna need a lot of time to talk about our main topic today, which is why I didn't even come up with a 4th topic. I said we're gonna have 3. We're gonna have our Unhinged for a light introduction to the day. We're gonna have this one, and we're gonna have the situation with what I am calling Supremacist Payout Law Center. So the biggest news this week is by far the news about the SPLC. People are still talking about it. They will forever talk about it. So I decided to give it extra time since I know we have a lot to say about it. And there are a lot of angles to tackle this from. And we also have memes, I believe, for all of our wonderful audience's enjoyment. So for those of you who do not know what I'm talking about right now, the Southern Poverty Law Center, a civil rights group that's pretty infamous in the United States for being extremely biased towards left politics and causes, was federally indicted this Tuesday on charges of wire fraud and false statements to banks and conspiracy to commit money laundering. All of that is bad on its own. But the real story comes from why they were doing those crimes. That money, you see, was being sent to members of groups like the Ku Klux Klan. Yep. So, in fact, the SPLC funded informants who were paid to post racist comments online, and even helped organize the infamous Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, where that very fine people hoax originated. So the SPLC claims that what they did was fine because it was just intelligence gathering on dangerous groups. But Attorney General Todd Blanche said that there was actually no evidence that the information was even shared with law enforcement. Hot Air reports, we already knew that the fine people hoax was based on the lie that Trump called white supremacists very fine people instead of, as he did, condemning them. But until yesterday, we didn't know that the white supremacists who marched in Charlottesville and whose protests led to the death of one person were bussed there on the Southern Poverty Law Center's dime and were organized to be there by an SPLC informer. 2 weeks after the Unite the Right rally occurred, SPLC went from 65 to 130 million in donations. So for SPLC, it was a twofer. They were able to smear Donald Trump and all Republicans, and also were able to double their revenues at a time when their donations were getting shaky. There are a lot of angles to cover here, Jim. I know you just had a big rant, so I'm actually going to pitch this over to Sam. I've just decided to start. I want your initial take on this, Sam, because this is, it's the kind of thing that we've always suspected in kind of like right-wing circles, right? That groups like the SPLC and others were questionable with where their funding was actually going, but also that sometimes there were some individuals or some circumstances at, right-wing events that seemed a little convenient for some of the media narratives, right? So I'll pitch it to you, Sam, first to start us off here. What is going on?
Well, this all requires power. What it requires, hold on. We got a barking dog going on here. This all requires power.
It's not mine for once.
It requires political corruption. And so what you have here is a situation where an organization has been creating false flag operations. That's really what it is. It's false flags. The Charlottesville one is a classic false flag operation, where the people who want to publicize the badness of their opponents create something that will be attributed to their opponents and make them look bad. And we know that our government has done this in the past. They've admitted it in many cases. We know that during the presidential administration from 2009 through January 2016 created multiple false flag operations to create color revolutions across the Middle East in order to give greater power to Iran. There are so many instances we know of false flag operations. So they generally, when governments commit them, obviously, that is an absolutely horrific thing. But when private institutions do that, well, okay. I mean, do they have a right to try? I don't think so, because this is fraud. It's fraud. So what happens is, in a decent and well-run society, you have companies like this, organizations like this, get prosecuted for the things that they do. You're not allowed to commit force or fraud. That's what government is for, is to prevent people from being manipulated by fraud and coerced by force. So that's what government is for. But the point is that's so important here is that government allowed this to happen. They knew these things were going on, in my view, and they were quite happy with it. And so when you have these, especially because people would move from these organizations to other organizations, and then they'd move into government. Now, the people who were doing these activities in the right-wing organizations, they were not quote unquote informants, much less reporters. They were agents provocateurs. They were paid to create false flag operations. That's what they were doing. And that is a matter of absolute criminal behavior. And then to raise money for this by claiming that you're fighting the very thing you're creating is absolute. That's an absolute crime. It's a financial crime. It's fraud. It's just absolutely awful. They've been getting away with it because obviously the Biden administration surely could easily have known, as well as the Trump administration, Justice Department now knows. So they could have easily known that. It's either incredibly gross and, in fact, absurdly strange level of negligence, or it's deliberate. And my expectation and my belief is that it's probably not the former. So this is a matter, again, of the country having been turned, and you saw it in what you said about the 2020 election was part of this, and you see it in Virginia, that it's turning the country into a 1940s to 1960s, or really a Jim Crow era, small town in the American South, run by a particular political party that was responsible for and proponents of slavery and then Jim Crow, and that are proponents of now other racially orientated issues and policies. And that party has deployed corruption and, frankly, quite evil behavior for well over a century, a couple of centuries, really. And until you get enforcement of the law, you're not going to get real change in this country, real positive change. You're just going to get a continual slide into destruction and self-destruction, really. So it goes back to a phrase I've often used: it, liberty relies on rule of law. If you don't have rule of law, you can't have freedoms, because people can stomp on your freedoms through a variety of ways, through the acts of government, through the acts of so-called private organizations that are highly connected with the government and that are given a free pass, get out of jail free card by the government. The one nice thing here is that we finally have a federal government, Department of Justice, that is willing to look into these things and at least get some indictments. So this is a big, very important story.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, the SPLC says that they were just paying informants or whatever, which is one, without digging too deep into that at first, that does kind of fall apart once you see in the indictment, they talk about the guy connected to the Unite the Right stuff, that all of their informants are not named in these indictments. I would be very interested to see them be named. I would be very interested to see who's who, because I'll bring this up in a little bit, but we do have some ideas to who certain individuals could be who are listed under these indictments, just based on past behavior and current behavior. But the interesting thing is that excuse of, well, we're just paying informants to, give us inside information into these, dangerous groups. Okay, you're the Southern Poverty Law Center. You're not a law enforcement agency, right? It also falls apart when you look at what they were actually paying the guy with the Unite the Right rally to do, which was giving him money so that he could bus other members of his organization, which I think it wasn't Patriot Front, but it was one of those, to the Charlottesville rally. And also was directing him and supervising what kind of racist posts that he would make online to gin people up to go to this thing. So this is, if the police did this, that would be like entrapment. The police aren't allowed to do that. So why would the Southern Poverty Law Center be allowed to do that? The reason why police informants work the way they do is because there are a lot of guardrails. There are all sorts of, when it's being run correctly. There are all sorts of laws that the police have to follow with regarding handling and communicating with them, what they're allowed to, like, if they're allowed to pay them or whatever. All of that stuff is regulated state by state. You can't just have an NGO doing this. It's crazy. So the other kind of angle that I alluded to here is that the informants are unnamed, but people are slowly starting to kind of connect some dots, which not confirmed. So I'll put that out there. So don't go bothering these people or anything. But Gavin McInnes is the founder of the Proud Boys, who were invited to a lot of these types of rallies, like the Charlottesville one and stuff. And they were like, nah, for the most part. And he tweeted out that he remembers an individual called Jason Kessler was demanding me and the Proud Boys to come to Charlottesville. And I kept refusing again and again. He wouldn't drop it. I remember screaming at him on the phone to F off and let it go. And that guy happens to actually have the position in that organization that is indicated in the indictment. So, or at one point in time he did. So that's kind of suspicious. Very, very interesting to see that. And also there's a tweet by Andy No, who who researches like Antifa and stuff. And I had this exact same thought when he brought it up, because if you guys know anything about Richard Spencer, he was like the alt-right, whatever guy running around making a fool out of himself on television all the time. For some reason, like CNN and stuff would have him on, even though no one else in these like right dissident spaces were able to get, platformed like this. And as soon as that stuff started to fall apart, he all of a sudden like basically 180'd in his politics and is now like a progressive liberal online in his politics. So
starting in 2020, he
Yeah.
endorsed Joe Biden.
Yeah. So Andy No says, I wonder if liberal media alt-right star Richard Spencer was the 2017 Charlottesville alt-right rally leader who was bankrolled and supervised by the SPLC for his messaging. Because the Antifa activist Michael E. Hayden, who was a former SPLC spokesman, later defended Spencer and accidentally suggested a few years ago that he knew more about him than he was willing to say publicly. So there's another one. Guys, be careful out there. I mean, these obvious ones like Spencer, because he was just a lunatic in the first place. No one, even people who were grouped into that like alt-right category, didn't particularly like Spencer. They pretty much all thought he was stupid. But he was very suspicious from the beginning. But there are probably people out there who are less suspicious. We remember this from the or even more so, we remember this from the Gretchen Whitmer near kidnapping plot, and it turned out to be like a Man Who Is Thursday situation where every single one of the people involved was actually a police officer or a federal agent. Jim, I think you had comments about that situation because, if the feds can do this stuff, why does the SPLC think that they can also do this stuff?
Well, I mean, I'm going to try to remain calm for as long as I can.
No, I gave you enough time to like settle down from the 2020 election fraud topic. So
Yeah.
you
Well,
should be okay.
Well, as you pointed out, the Southern Poverty Law Center is not a law enforcement agency. The idea of like they're paying informants. Let me do a little hypothetical for you here. Let's just say, for instance, Greenpeace has for years been secretly paying Linnea Lucan handsomely to infiltrate the Heartland Institute. And we have all just been completely oblivious and thought nothing about how she could afford such a fancy chicken coop with designer birds. She just saved her money. That's how that happened. But the secret plan of Greenpeace is for Linnea then to spearhead a series of videos that oppose everything Greenpeace has been working to accomplish for decades. And then those videos prove super popular that they generate more than 1 million views. So Greenpeace has infiltrated Heartland with the result of making this even more prominent and successful. That's not why you plant a paid informant. It's not to make the targeted organization even better. It's to take it down from the inside. That is, if you have both the legal authority to even do so. It's watch any movie. Watch Donnie Darko, I think, is one of the movies that does that. It's like, you don't infiltrate an organization to make it more successful, to put on a stop hate, unite the right rally. And you also don't pay millions of dollars to the leaders of these racist organizations. That's not how you infiltrate an enemy organization. Look, Sam just said it. Charlottesville was basically a psyop. The Southern Poverty Law Center was paying the protesters against the white supremacists, and they were also paying the white supremacists. That's insane. And the fact that they thought they could get away with it. We're going to get into the specific crimes that are alleged here, and they are very serious, in a few minutes here. But, actually, I want to set something up. We have a video here. The reason why this is so dangerous and such a big story and really needs to stay in the news for a long time, our mainstream media, of course, is trying to wave this away. But look, all right, I'll set it up this way. The Southern Poverty Law Center has committed a hate crime against the American people with this Charlottesville psyop. They were trying to gin up a race war in this country. I think we need to be clear about that. And they were putting targets on the backs of mainstream conservatives and conservative organizations. So we have a clip here that I grabbed this morning from our late friend, Charlie Kirk. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which both the Biden administration took as basically a partner in its prosecutorial focus, and the media took the Southern Poverty Law Center's word as gospel. If they called you a hate group, you were a hate group. The Southern Policy Law Center put Turning Point USA on their hate map, and a few months later, Charlie Kirk was killed. Can we play? And he almost predicted his death on an interview on Fox News. Can we play that video, please, Andy?
High school chapters of ours on a hate group next to the KKK and next to neo-Nazi groups. And I mean, we can laugh this off. There's an element to this. Remember that there was a shooter that went to the Family Research Council years ago, inspired by the SPLC list. This is them trying to make us basically surrender at Turning Point USA. We're going to do the opposite, and our students are only going to lean in even more. But they can't debate us on our ideas. They cannot have dialogue. They cannot actually go onto the merits of why they are right or why we might be wrong. Instead, they must smear us with the age-old one-liner that you are a racist or that you are a hater, and they're finally realizing the power of Turning Point USA, which is why they put us on this list.
Well, when you're effective, you're a threat.
The man alleged who's been charged with murdering Charlie Kirk in front of his family and in front of a crowd of people on live television, that part of the investigation, the indictment, he said you can't negotiate with hate, and so you have to take action, I suppose. This is the running theme here. The Southern Poverty, the SPLC put a target on Charlie Kirk, and somebody used that target to put a bullet through it and kill him. The Southern Poverty Law Center worked with, as I mentioned before, worked with Biden's Justice Department, worked with their FBI. The Southern Poverty Law Center considered conservative Catholic groups to be a terroristic threat to the United States. Joe Biden, again, echoing the rhetoric and the work of the Southern Poverty Law Center, said that white supremacy was the biggest threat to the homeland. Repeatedly, he said this. In his State of the Union address, he said this. In that infamous Blood Red speech in Philadelphia, I believe, he said this. The FBI said this. His Justice Department said this. And of course, Joe Biden himself, the whole Charlottesville thing was basically a complete hoax. And repeatedly, if you take him at his word, Joe Biden said the reason he had to run for president in 2020 was because of Charlottesville. Kamala Harris in the debate with Donald Trump in the 2024 election brought up Charlottesville, and it was fake. It wasn't real. I mean, the whole idea, I was thinking about this morning, the whole idea that it was called the Unite the Right rally. There is nobody on the right who went to that, on the real right, not the fake right, not the gaslit right, not the Potemkin right that the left created. Nobody, no mainstream conservative was anywhere near that rally. And so, but again, if you're on the left and you want to smear everybody on the right, You create a white supremacist rally that's called Unite the Right, and the media will run with it. And this narrative takes hold. After Charlottesville, Apple gave the Southern Poverty Law Center $1 million donation. George Clooney kicked in another $1 million. Their revenue went up. I think it was about 50 million, which is obviously quite a lot. $50 million in revenue before Charlottesville. It went up to, I think, 100 and something million after that. And right now, as this indictment has come forward, again, a grand jury handed down this indictment. This is not just some sort of witch hunt by the Trump administration. They now have something like $800 million in assets. By the way, and I think they have 150 million on an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. That's not suspicious. That's crazy. So this organization fundraised on fake white supremacist movement in this country. I know so many of us on this podcast and are listening right now or watching. I was always just kind of amazed, like, what's this Christian nationalist stuff? What's this white supremacy stuff? I know nobody who thinks or talks this way. The entire idea that the biggest danger to the United States is white supremacy was always a lie, and it was a psyop, and it was set up by the Southern Poverty Law Center and other leftist organizations, and the Democratic Party, and especially the Biden administration, were all too eager to run with that, to run down this country, to characterize everybody who opposes them as some sort of dangerous white supremacist. And it's the same gaslighting of the American people that led to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump, and even in our first segment today, those street animals, as Jesse Kelly calls them, those thugs out there assaulting conservative journalists that are out there just trying to document the protests that are going on. And Andy was helpful enough to bring up something that I grabbed for the show, and this was the term frequency in popular U.S. newspapers of the term white supremacy. The New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. In about 2015, it went off the charts. And so the entire thing is a psyop. We're being lied to constantly by our media and by, well, especially the previous government. The result of this is not just sad and infuriating, it's actually dangerous. This is, it's all projection all the way down. The danger in this country does not come from right-wing, protesters or white supremacy. Open your eyes. All you have to do is look outside. Look at who's doing these protests. Look at the Antifa movement, which was just an idea, not really an organization. That was the attitude of the Biden administration. It's infuriating. I am very proud of myself for not screaming, and I will I will get away from the microphone for a minute.
Well, I'm going to temper it just a second, just to say that, we have to be careful too about letting the left drive our thoughts about different right-wing protest movements and stuff, though, because I am going to push back a bit about Charlottesville, because while there was that white supremacist group that came in later and did that cringy tiki torch march or whatever, the majority of the people that were there throughout the day were just protesting the removal of a Confederate monument. That's right. And I don't think that there's anything particular, immediately always white supremacist about opposing, ripping down historical monuments, even if they are to the slave owning South. I'd have to push back on that, because there are legitimate people who attend that. And it's the same kind of thing that they push with January 6th. That was a legitimate protest. There was agitation, obviously, from what appeared to be federal agents actually at that, and probably also SPLC agents, it turns out, at that event, that led to things getting out of hand. But the initial protest itself is not illegitimate. And I don't want Americans on the right to be afraid of protesting. So for one, Moms for Liberty is listed. And this is something that Donald Kendall was going to talk about. We tried to get him on, and he was going to come, but he actually didn't end up having time. So that's all right. But he did send me his notes, some of the things that he wanted to point out. Moms for Liberty is listed on a hate group on the SPLC hate map. And they basically every single chapter that they have is marked with a pin, which is crazy. And so The Watchdog's Year in Hate and Extremism 2022 report counted 1,225 hate and anti-government extremist groups being present in the United States last year, up from 733 in 2021. And several of the new additions were focused on parental rights and education issues. So they were pushing and pushing and pushing and broadening the category of what counts as white supremacy, like Charlie Kirk pointed out, like Jim's pointed out, with the intent of mixing that and muddying that water, right? You have like literally the KKK and then Moms for Liberty, which just is worried about parental rights. So, it's getting a little bit, I don't know. I don't want to give them the ability more than we already have to direct the thought about these groups, right? So we do have to be very careful about that. And Sam, I'm sorry I cut you off a little bit. What were you going to say?
It was actually along these lines. It's really important to, as you say, to note that this is not an attempt to root out wrongthink from extremists on the edge of reality or something. It's not that. It's not an attempt to root out people who are traitors to the American way or something like that. What it is an attempt to make all dissent from certain positions of government, and frankly, make all dissent from the establishment of an authoritarian government into extremism and to characterize it as such. And what has been done here is the use of racism and white supremacy as the stalking horse for a denigration of anyone who disagrees with this sort of gigantic authoritarian regime that the left has been trying, and with some significant success, to impose in this country for many years. And it's interesting because you can go back to the first Bush administration, George H.W. Bush. There were a lot of attempts to create the sense that there is a strong group of white supremacists out there. They're all over the country, and the whole country is covered with white supremacists. And it seemed ludicrous to anyone with good sense at the time, or anyone reading the history on it. It's obviously ludicrous. It's insane. I mean, to look at what this country has been doing for the past 40 years, it certainly isn't white supremacist. That's the one thing it isn't. So this was clearly a false flag operation, a gigantic, frankly, false flag operation from the start. The whole white supremacy narrative, the whole America is racist narrative, has been based on false flag operations from the beginning. And so what you have here is a situation where this one organization is part of a much bigger group. And you mentioned the G.K. Chesterton novel, The Man Who Was Thursday. Thank you very much for bringing in Chesterton again.
I'm keeping us going here, Sam. We're going to mention him in every single show.
The key thing about it is, as you mentioned, everybody involved in the so-called conspiracy, it's anarchists in that book, everyone involved in it is in fact a government agent. And if you look at this, it came true. It came true only on a level that is just completely mind-blowing. Obviously, there are nut jobs out there who believe terrible things and do terrible things. We've seen that, of course. But the notion that this nation has been driven by racism and white supremacy is absurd. And much of the blame for this has to be laid at the feet of the government, because they've been doing this for decades. And even during Republican administrations, it's been very prominent. Our intelligence agencies and our criminal enforcement agencies have been corrupt from the word go. And isn't it interesting that this indictment occurs only a very short time after our Attorney General is replaced. What's up with that? I just ask you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is funny as Andy was scrolling the map there, highlighting the different dots, and like 2/3 of the dots he scrolled over were Moms for Liberty. That's why I was laughing, because it's like just this regular old like parents' rights organization that's absolutely not anywhere near like a far right thing. It's just the whole map is Moms for Liberty. Sorry, I'm like brought to tears by how funny that is. So, but Jim, we have the indictment available to read. And it is actually probably one of the more interesting and clearly written indictments that I've seen. Sometimes they can be a little bit cagey. But actually, one of the remarkable things about this is the use of shell companies to basically launder the money to these supremacist groups. And to be fair, if SPLC wants to compare themselves to government agencies, this is how the CIA and stuff do this, like run their spies, right? They set up shell companies to pay them. Like they have fake jobs and stuff at other organizations, and that's how they get paid. One of these guys was getting paid like $1 million over the course of a couple of years, just from something like 2022 to 2025. It's kind of crazy how organized this is and how professional this is.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, the bottom line, really, the crimes here are that the indictment alleges that the Southern Poverty Law Center committed fraud against its own donors because they think they're donating to an organization that is fighting white supremacy and racism. And the Southern Poverty Law Center is instead using that money to support and promote white supremacy and racism. I mean, so on one level, I think it's hilarious that George Clooney unknowingly is an unknowing donor to the KKK, and so I hope he can sleep at night. I am not a overt or unknowing donor to white supremacist groups, but George Clooney is, and so that's out there for the world. That is right. So where was it? Yeah. So they set up these shell. See, all right. So the Southern Poverty Law Center, and we had it in a poll here on the YouTube channel, is a 501c3 organization. That means in tax law, the IRS considers it a legitimate nonprofit organization, which means that it is not taxed on its revenue. Again, which is now almost $1 billion, and they pay no tax on that to the federal government. But with that comes quite a lot of rules. The Heartland Institute is a 501c3 organization. We are audited by an independent auditor every year, and we publish that audit on our website as along with our 990 forms. There's, which is what a good nonprofit organization should do, and as SPLC does that as well. But while they are actually reporting legally what they're doing, they're also illegally, according to the indictment, setting up shell companies through which to pay these white supremacists and leaders of white supremacist organizations because they don't want their donors to know that they're doing this. They didn't want anybody to know that they were doing this. So they had to set up, as it says in the indictment, as Kash Patel pointed out, these are fake companies that have no employees and do no business. That is the kind of stuff that the mob does. That is a serious crime to do that. And it is fraud against their own donors and really against the public. And as with all of these things, when is somebody going to go to jail? This was fraud on a massive scale. And, God bless, Kash Patel and the new Attorney General. I now forget his name, because he's brand new, and the Trump Justice Department. But I am so sick and tired of having the criminal activity of especially when it concerns our elections or things in the public trust, and nobody is arrested. This is an indictment. Where are the arrests? After these are charges, somebody should be in handcuffs and marched in to be booked for crimes. When is that going to happen, Kash Patel? When is anybody going to be arrested, at least? We had the FBI breaking down the doors of people who were at the Capitol on January 6th and did nothing more criminal than walking into the Capitol at the invitation, often by the Capitol Police, walking around for 15 minutes and leaving. They had their doors bashed in at 5 a.m. by the FBI, hauled off to jail, and in some cases kept in jail in solitary confinement for months or even years without the adjudication of their case, before it could even be adjudicated in a rigged court system, frankly, in Washington, D.C. That is the way the legal system apparently treats people on the right. If you're on the left and commit one of the greatest, scandals, and there seems to be a new one every month, but this is a very scandalous thing, but it's also a very serious criminal thing. People need to start going to jail for this. It's very dissatisfying that this is not happening. For crying out loud, Donald Trump, how many indictments were there? So they could say he was a convicted felon and all that kind of stuff in 17 different jurisdictions, something like 50 felony charges. He had to get booked at a police station. When is anybody at the SPLC going to be booked? I'll just finish with this, because the Heartland Institute is a think tank. We've been around for 42 years. My signature is on the financial documents for the Heartland Institute that we submit to the IRS and that we publicly have out there. If there was any criminal activity involved in that, I'm going to jail because I put my name on it. There are names on documents from the SPLC, and those people should be arrested and calling their lawyers right now. When is that going to happen?
Yeah, it is very frustrating because it never happens. It's you also want to make sure, because this something like this really could, frankly, even though they'll probably get more donations, because you'll have left wingers who are like, yeah, cool, they were doing espionage with my donations, I'm fine with that, and they'll be fine with it, so they probably won't lose any donors over this. But this should be the end of the SPLC. I mean, if there's any justice at all, they will be absolutely crushed by these indictments. I wanted to bring up one of the other examples here from the indictment that I found particularly interesting. Let's see. Oh, there's a whole story. It's crazy. Section B under the SPLC's paid informants network. They list one of these guys. This is, down there to B. Yep, right there. So there's this one that's F9 is what they have given him as his little code name, was affiliated with the neo-Nazi organization National Alliance and served as a F for the SPLC for more than 20 years. So this guy worked for them for 20 years. Between 2014 and 2023, they paid him more than $1 million. In 2014, he entered the headquarters of an extremist group and stole 25 boxes of documents from them. And then he coordinated payment for the copying of those materials with a high-level SPLC employee who had knowledge that the documents had been stolen. Those stolen materials were returned to the extremist group in a second illegal entry. And then the high-level SPLC employee utilized the documents in part as the basis for a story published on the SPLC's Hate Watch website, authored by the employee. And another one of them was blamed for the theft and was paid $6,000 for taking the heat, basically, for that situation. That is a wild story to read in an indictment. There are multiple crimes in just this one. And the SPLC was aware of all of it and paying for it. So I think it would be really difficult. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know for sure. It seems to me like it's going to be very difficult for them to slip out of this one.
One thing that will be interesting to see is there is the potential for civil rights violations to be prosecuted against the individuals in this organization who are running it. Civil rights violations are very serious. When those are brought against you, when those charges are brought against you, they hit hard. So that's one way that this could play out. And another element of that, of course, is that there could be civil lawsuits in regard to such violations. And I would suggest that that's very likely to happen. As I think more and more about it, I think the prospects for the survival of the SPLC are very dim. I'm not at all dissatisfied to say that.
Yeah, ADL next. The Anti-Defamation League and the SPLC together have been two of the biggest forces for basically like protecting leftist extremism, while trying to classify all right-wing movements and protests and stuff as extreme. So I want to lighten the mood a bit here. There have been a lot of memes about this because when you take it to its like comedic direction, this is a funny situation in a dark way. I laugh a lot as I'm reading this like indictment and stuff, just in disbelief. And so we have a bunch of memes for you guys here today to end the show. This is from Flapper on X. And it's from, what show is this from? I
Mad
forget.
Men. The Mad
Oh,
Men.
it's from Mad Men. That's right. Has a Southern Poverty Law Center. So for our audio listeners, I'm sorry to everybody else that I have to read these out, but we do have audio only listeners. The caption says, "We pay people to be racist so that we can fight racism." And we have a GIF from, I believe, Django Unchained, where the like proto KKK guy is wearing his hood, and he says, "I can't see effing shit out of this thing." And the caption is, "When you got the 'please remember to wear a mask' notice for your SPLC meeting and you didn't realize they meant the N95s." And then Robert Sterling posted a Dave Ramsey show meme where he goes, "So your mission at the SPLC is fighting racism." "Yes, Dave. And you've raised millions of dollars for this?" "That's right. And you spent that money on," "We gave it to the KKK, Dave." And another, "White supremacy is our biggest problem. Be honest. Racism is everywhere and must be stopped." "Stopped how?" "We made it all up to get votes. Thank you." Another good one. And this is a picture of Sydney Sweeney making a very disgusting...
Sabrina Carpenter. How do I have to correct you on that?
Oh, I don't know. They're all the same. I'm sorry, Sydney Sweeney and Sabrina Carpenter. They look the same to me. We were talking before the show that I actually had no idea that Sabrina Carpenter was a singer. Which just shows how out of touch I am. I thought that she just did like makeup advertisements on YouTube that annoyed me during my videos I was trying to watch. But so Drunk Republican captions this: "My woke aunt learning her SPLC donations were funding the KKK." Mostly peaceful memes. Finding out the SPLC has been paying people to promote white supremacy, and it's a guy saying, "You guys are getting paid?" And I think that's from We're the Millers. Very funny movie. When Jarvis, who is a very funny account, when you're at a Klan rally and you see another SPLC intern, and they're looking at each other from across the room. Yeah, I'm sure that actually happens too. It's pretty funny. Sorry, it's a little bit cringe to have to read out the memes, but we do have audio only listeners, so that's why I'm trying to keep this show going for you guys as well, so that we're not all just quietly giggling to ourselves for the audio. But thank you guys so much for being here. That is pretty much all the time that we have today. There are a lot of crazy situations going on in this world right now, and it gets more and more cartoonish every day, it seems. So thank you everyone for your attention to these matters. We are live every week, Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, except for the weeks we are not. Jim, what do you have for the audience today?
We have the Climate Realism Show on the same channel at Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Mark Morano from CFAC is going to be our guest. It's going to be a really fun show. Hope to see you there.
Sam?
Please visit the Heartland Institute website at heartland.org and my Substack at stkarnick.substack.com.
For our audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using. Look what I did for you today. Please leave a review as well. Thank you so much to all of our usual panelists and also, of course, to our viewers. We will see you again next week.